Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This is the continuation of Protect Your Heart. This will be Part 3, Chapter 3. The week after that study session was strange to Hitoshi. Even though Midoriya ended up spending time with his friends again, he still continues to hang around Hitoshi. Maybe they're not eating every lunch together. And Midoriya is no longer clinging to him, but they've been continuing with the study sessions. And one time, Midoriya came over not to study, but just to share some cake with Hitoshi. He certainly isn't complaining, but he doesn't understand why Midoriya is still acting like they're friends. He doesn't want to go out and assume they are. The last time he did that with someone, it went less than well. He ended up locked in a supply closet. But Midoriya isn't doing anything to discourage that way of thinking. Maybe the reason he's feeling so apprehensive of this relationship is because the time they spent together before Midoriya learned control over Black Whip felt more like he was a security blanket of sorts. During that time, he didn't once think that Midoriya was hanging out with him because he wanted to be around Hitoshi. The whole time, he knew it was only because Hitoshi was one of the few people with the power to stop Black Whip. Midoriya just wanted him around to stop feeling scared of his own quirk. It was something Hitoshi simultaneously understood and felt totally lost about. He'd never been able to rely on someone else to help with his quirk. If he had someone like that, would he have stuck to them like Midoriya did? Would he continue that after he had proper control? Probably not. But that doesn't mean Midoriya wouldn't. For all Hitoshi knows, he could have somehow tricked Midoriya into hanging out with him by making him feel safe. Well, when he puts it like that, it doesn't seem very logical, but it makes more sense than the alternative. Hitoshi is boring and depressing. The only reason Shinohara is his friend is because Shinohara would find a rock amusing. Midoriya has such interesting and cool friends already. There's no reason for him to add Hitoshi onto that. Yet, Midoriya is constantly surpassing his expectations, starting with when he broke out of Hitoshi's quirk. When there's a knock on the door, Hitoshi crawls out of bed and peeks out the door. Midoriya standing there isn't a surprise to him, but he's not really sure why the teen showed up today. What's up? Didn't you have that outing with your friends today? Yeah, we're going to the mall, he says excitedly. Hitoshi quirks an eyebrow. I thought 1A was banned from mall trips, he says with a smirk. Midoriya pouts before saying, You know that isn't true. Aizawa-sensei tried, sure, but you can't ban teenagers from going to the mall, he says in a stressed-out voice. Midoriya makes a solid point, but Hitoshi thinks it's still funny that Aizawa felt the need to attempt it at all. And what a shame that is, Hitoshi draws, just to see the look on Midoriya's face. It's enough to get a chuckle out of him. Did you leave something in my room, then? Midoriya gives him a sheepish smile. I don't think I've ever successfully left your room with all my stuff, he jokes, and it's pretty true. Whether it's his journal or pens or even his laptop that one time, Izuku's stuff is becoming a staple part of his room. But, actually, I was wondering if you wanted to come with us. Oh, why? He asks. It feels a bit like this invitation is coming out of the blue. They talked about the outing before, but Midoriya hadn't invited him then, so why now? The question seems logical to Hitoshi, but it seems to stop Midoriya in a panic. His hands fly around as if trying to grab onto a collection of invisible words as he attempts to stammer out a response. Well, I feel like, no, not that, but... Midoriya's eyes are scrunched up, and Hitoshi almost wants to take back his question and apologize for asking in the first place. I guess I just feel better with you there, he says sheepishly, like he's embarrassed to admit it. Hitoshi immediately understands. Midoriya would feel safer, is what he's trying to say. He doesn't want Hitoshi there. He wants his quirk there. He should have seen this coming, but why would he think anyone would want to use someone for a villainous quirk? He remembers in middle school when his classmate, Takuya, would have hordes of people surrounding him. But in the end, they were only there because they wanted to take advantage of his studious nature and basic yet helpful quirk. He would have felt sorry for the kid if Takuya wasn't just as shitty to him as the rest of his classmates. Now, he's getting a glimpse of how Takuya must have felt. Spoiler alert, it's not good. He doesn't voice any of this to Midoriya. In fact, he doubts Midoriya is even conscious of why he wants Hitoshi around all the time, and if he was, he'd probably apologize immediately. He was just like that. For someone with such a strong quirk, he's constantly putting himself below others. Hitoshi thinks Midoriya would put the whole world before himself. Yeah, I didn't have anything planned for today anyway, he says, and Midoriya's smile blossoms like a flower. Great, the other teen cheers. Do you need a bit of time to get ready? He looks down at his outfit and realizes with slight mortification that he's wearing Wild Wild Pussycat pajama pants. Let me just change into some jeans, he mutters out before closing the door on Midoriya. Luckily, his crush doesn't have the best sense of fashion either, so he should be fine. Now he just has to hope that nothing disastrous occurs during their outing. Midoriya, basically who else could it be, knocks on Hitoshi's door, but he just continues lying on his bed, paralyzed by his own thoughts. He ended up going out with Midoriya and his friends yesterday. While it had gone well, Hitoshi had felt a bit out of place. Honestly, at some points, it felt like Midoriya's friends were interrogating him. He'd been hounded with mostly harmless questions, but hounded nonetheless. Midoriya had apologized on their behalf, saying that his friends were a bit too protective, which Hitoshi understood. But he couldn't help but wonder why they were asking so many questions. It couldn't be because of his quirk. All the questions were far too normal for that. Instead, it felt a bit more like they were trying to tear him apart piece by piece to find out his intentions with their friend. He shudders just thinking about how brutal Suyu's questioning had been. Seemed like everyone except Midoriya had caught on to his crush, but why were they taking it so seriously when Midoriya was so obviously out of his league? He supposes it doesn't really matter, because near the end of their time together, after they had come back to the dorms, but before they'd started playing the board game Ida had picked out, he heard Uraraka and Midoriya talking. It sounded pretty serious, so of course he listened along. Uraraka was telling Midoriya that he had to be more headstrong and just tell Hitoshi how he felt. Out of context, could have sounded exactly like Hitoshi wanted it to, but he knew what they were talking about. Midoriya didn't really want to be his friend. Either he felt bad for using Hitoshi for his quirk, or he hung out with Hitoshi out of pity. Midoriya had responded shyly. He was scared to tell Hitoshi how he felt because he wanted to keep hanging out with Hitoshi. Wanted to keep using Hitoshi's quirk, his brain had translated. That night, he'd asked Uraraka what he would do if Hitoshi was upset with him, and Hitoshi had used that moment to stop eavesdropping. Now he is sure that Midoriya is standing outside his door for that very conversation. When Midoriya knocks a second time, Hitoshi forces himself out of bed. "Shinso, are you awake?" Hitoshi can hear from the other side of the door. There's the sound of footsteps walking away from the door, and Hitoshi rushes the door open before Midoriya can get too far. He peeks his head out and sees Midoriya turn around. The hero student offers a small wave before walking over. "I hope I didn't bother you," he admits with red cheeks. Hitoshi shakes his head. "It's fine. Did you want to talk?" he says, jumping the gun a bit, but wanting to get this over with. Midoriya gives him a small, grateful smile and sits down with his notebook lying on the ground beside him. Hitoshi hadn't even noticed the notebook until now. He looks away and sits across from Midoriya. Midoriya fiddles with his fingers at the table before meeting Hitoshi's eyes. He seems so earnest right now. Hitoshi hates it. "Shinso, I want to apologize. I feel like I've been taking advantage of your kindness. I've been selfish in how much I made you hang out with me, and I haven't been honest." Hitoshi squeezes his eyes shut. He doesn't want to hear this. But Midoriya doesn't stop talking. "In actuality, it's been since the sports festival, but I'm gonna stop you there," Hitoshi interrupts, cool rage coursing through his veins. "I heard you and Uraraka talking, and I'm not stupid enough to have missed all the signs. I know what this is about, and I don't care. Even still, we probably shouldn't hang out anymore." Midoriya's whole face drops. "What? But—" His voice falters, and tears spring up to his eyes. "Okay. I understand, Shinso. I'm sorry for not telling you earlier." Hitoshi's eyes are stuck on the tears pouring down Midoriya's face as the teen leaves his room. When he's all alone, there's an aching inside him that wonders if he did the right thing. The rest of the day passes in a sludge. He forces himself to do his homework, and when he goes to bed, he doesn't even take his phone to distract him from the frustration of his insomnia. He just stares at the ceiling and mulls over the past few weeks. His sleep that night is more fitful than ever. He sent Midoriya away, so why does he still want the teen in his life? The next morning, he feels like shit. His mind tells him that it's rightfully so after what he said to Midoriya, after he made him cry like that. But he couldn't have gone through that kind of relationship with Midoriya. Knowing that Midoriya didn't even want him as a friend while Hitoshi was stuck fantasizing about the two of them adopting a cat together, it would have been too much to bear. He looks over his room, and his eyes stick to the table. The table's nearly empty, aside from a half-empty glass of water and some papers from his notebook yesterday. He still has some stuff to take care of if he wants to be able to turn it in tomorrow in class. He groans and flops onto his side. After how awfully he slept last night, the exhaustion has seeped into every muscle. He doesn't even want to get out of bed, but then his eyes catch on something. It's Midoriya's notebook, left behind in the teen's haste to leave. It's enough to get him standing and walking over to it. In a numb haze, he sits down at the table and picks up the notebook. Looking through the pages is like a direct look into Midoriya's brain. It's written hastily in organized chaos. Though most pages have direction, there are clear areas where he got carried away and his writing gets smaller than Hitoshi thought possible. It's a bunch of notes on their classmates with a few random pro heroes thrown in. Hitoshi had known Midoriya was interested in analysis, but this was more than just an interest. Hitoshi can see his passion and care in these pages. It's clear he spent a lot of time thinking about and exploring quirks. Most entries have some doodles of their hero costumes with notes added all around the edge of the drawing. He pauses on the entry for Monoma. Can't hold back his snickers when he notices that Midoriya added some more personal thoughts about Monoma's poor attitude. He keeps scrolling until he comes across one of the only pages with color added. On the top of the page is a swath of purples, put down for reference, as if Midoriya had been trying to find the perfect one. And below that is 2 drawings of Hitoshi. The larger drawing is from the first study session they spent together, when Midoriya had asked to draw Hitoshi. It had been done in a light sketch with wispy pencil strokes, outlining Hitoshi's focus and tiredness. The way Midoriya had drawn him is surprisingly lovely. Though it's recognizably Hitoshi, there's an elegance to the drawing that Hitoshi doesn't think he carries in person. A blush comes onto his face when he reads the small notes around the drawing. There are a couple of bullet points, done in hearts, reading. Shinso's hair is always up. Does he use gel, or is it naturally like that? Wonder how soft it is. Other than the eye bags, Shinso's face is really smooth. So are his lips. I'm so embarrassed. He has to really study the last bullet point to read what it says, and when he does, his face lights up with a blush. Does Midoriya really think about him like that? From there, he looks to the side where Midoriya had done a small sketch of Hitoshi's entire figure, but with a hero costume. Considering he doesn't have a costume yet, it seems to be completely done with Midoriya's imagination. It features him with a hooded dark purple tank top and semi-baggy pants. His voice changer is in place over his mouth, and the hood is up, shielding his eyes. Despite how he's been learning how to wield Aizawa's capture weapon, Midoriya altered that, so Hitoshi has a capture weapon wrapped around each of his arms. They look a bit like bandages, but he has illustrated one of them moving to demonstrate their true purpose. There are 2 small blades on Hitoshi's waist and one on the side of the combat boots. It's incredibly well detailed. The more Hitoshi reads, the more he feels like he's drowning in Midoriya's words. There's half a page where Midoriya just rambles about fighting him and Hitoshi's fighting style. How did Hitoshi never notice that Midoriya was paying such close attention to him? Probably the same way that he failed to notice that Midoriya returned his feelings, as evidenced by Hitoshi's entire entry, the heart scattered around it, the way the kanji of both their names is written under an umbrella. But Hitoshi had ruined all that. He groans and slams his head down on the table, right next to the notebook. He's such an idiot. With context, everything about the past week makes so much more sense. Even Midoriya's conversation with Uraraka, he'd felt guilty about not telling Hitoshi about his crush because, of course, that's something he would do. And yesterday, he hardly wants to think about that. Fuck. Hitoshi had probably seemed like some sort of massive homophobe, which is ironic considering just how gay he is, albeit disastrous. Now, he'd probably never even be able to get close to Midoriya, considering how much time he's wasted and how protective Midoriya's friends are. He smashes his head against the table for good measure before he stands up, notebook in hand, and leaves his room. He doesn't have a plan, despite how much he might need one, other than confronting Midoriya about the notebook and apologizing. He doubts that any feelings Midoriya previously had are still there, but he can't just sit there and let his 1% chance of reconciling with Midoriya fly by. He can only hope that, at the very least, Midoriya will give him another chance at friendship. Hitoshi gets lucky, for once in his life, and he doesn't have to fight all of Midoriya's friends for a chance to talk. On his way to the dorms, he spots the teen heading back from his afternoon run and pulls him aside to underneath a couple of trees. Unfortunately, to prevent Midoriya from running into the dorms, he had to call out Midoriya's name in a rush of desperation, and when Midoriya had looked at him, well, it definitely didn't make Hitoshi happy like it usually does. Instead, he felt dread and depression. Midoriya had looked exhausted and reluctant to meet with Hitoshi. Now that they're under the shade, Midoriya looks even more miserable. There's a slight darkness under his eyes, and despite his flush from running, the rest of him is pale. He doesn't even dare to stand close to Hitoshi. Hitoshi takes a small step forward, his tongue dries in his mouth, and with no idea what to say, but Midoriya just goes backward toward the trunk of the tree. He bites down on his lip before gripping the notebook that is still held behind him. He holds it out and sinks down into a half bow, his eyes trained upward to see Midoriya's reaction as he offers it back. I'm sorry. I misunderstood what you were trying to say. I was insecure about our friendship, and I took it out on you. He admits, trying to keep any weakness out of his voice. What? How? Midoriya stutters out, seeming genuinely confused, which Hitoshi understands. His feelings and fears came from a completely illogical place, but When Midoriya takes the notebook and holds it close to his chest, Hitoshi takes that as his cue to stand up and walk a bit closer. I haven't had a lot of friends before. I don't really get why anyone would want to be my friend, so when you kept asking me to be around, I thought it was only so you could use my quirk. You wanted to feel safe, and Brainwash helped you with that. It was fine until... He trails off when he sees Midoriya has started to cry. Midoriya's lower lip is wobbling as he wipes away his tears. I didn't know I was making you feel that way. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear about how I felt. Yesterday, I wanted... Wait. Before you say anything, I just need you to know that I really like you, and I don't want to lose you. I was being an idiot yesterday, and I'm sorry for how I made you feel, even if it's just as friends. I still want you in my life. And then Midoriya, in contrast to how he flinched away earlier, comes hurtling toward Hitoshi and wraps him in a hug with so much force that the two of them go flying backwards onto the grass and roll down a bit until Hitoshi is on top looking down at Midoriya. Midoriya has a blush on his cheeks, and he's looking up at Hitoshi with a million different emotions in his eyes. His stare is so intense that Hitoshi feels his face also heating up under it. Part of him wants to look away, just to stop the beating in his chest, but Midoriya has him locked in. He always has. Talk about miscommunication, he starts with a joke. I should have been clear with my feelings. I didn't just want you around for your quirk. You're important to me as a friend, and... Midoriya ends up being the first to look away as he presses his cheek to the grass below them. Has someone I really like, too. For a second, Hitoshi is frozen, just looking at Midoriya. How can someone be so pretty? The teen's hair is mingling with the grass below him, creating a lovely picture. Hitoshi wants to run his fingers through it once again. With all the green surrounding him, Midoriya's blush stands out even more. No, I should have listened to you more that day, instead of creating my own conclusions. I know you're not like that, but I've never met anyone like you before. Sometimes you're so good it's hard to believe. He spills out. Midoriya's attention is back on him, until Midoriya is reaching up and spinning them around again so that he's on top. I guess we both have things to work on, he says with a sheepish smile, like he's unsure with his own suggestion. Hitoshi can feel him get almost imperceptibly closer, and his breath hitches. I suppose we do. Midoriya moves even closer. Are they about to kiss? Hitoshi has to wonder, but then the other teen moves his head to the side and buries his face in Hitoshi's neck. Sorry, I guess I'm still a bit nervous, Midoriya admits, his breath warm on his skin. Hitoshi lies still under Midoriya's weight. He understands why Midoriya feels like that, maybe. If Hitoshi had listened to him yesterday, they wouldn't have to have this tension in the air. But Hitoshi is nervous, too. He's nervous because he hurt Midoriya and knows that there's no way he would ever deserve him. We can wait, he says, and Midoriya pushes himself up. There's no need to rush, he elaborates. Midoriya looks like he doesn't believe Hitoshi. Is that allowed? He asks skeptically. Of course, Hitoshi says with a note of melancholy in his voice. He's not sure if it comes from the mischance of actually having a relationship with Midoriya, or the fact that Midoriya is so apprehensive of setting up boundaries for whatever their future holds. No matter what he's feeling, he'll be sure to treat Midoriya with the care he deserves. They won't fall into this miscommunication again if he can help it. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 3 of Protect Your Heart. Chapter 4, the last and final chapter, will be next. I hope you all are still enjoying. Eager to see your thoughts and reactions to this chapter, and as always, thank you so much for listening.